Hello, and welcome to This Week in James City County. I'm your host, Renee Dahlman. I recently had the opportunity to sit down with Scott Stevens, James City County's county administrator. We discussed the FY2027 to FY2028 Proposed Operating Budget. Let's take a listen. Okay, Scott, thank you so much for taking time. I know that you are very, very busy, especially right now, because you are the man with the plan, this proposed budget.
Well, at least a proposed budget plan, Renee. Happy to be here. It's a good topic for us to be talking about. We certainly want the community to understand where we are and what the drivers are behind our financial needs to serve this community. And it's a great community, but it's growing. It takes additional resource. And I know we have people that are very interested in why. And so I'm happy to talk through that.
Okay, I know that we just have a short period of time, and one thing that we're wanting to make sure that we cover is when the public meeting is.
You're going to start with that instead of end with that.
Well,
I
think we'll probably do both. I may bring it up 3 or 4 times. Who knows?
There are a couple opportunities for public engagement. The first will be April 9th at 5:30 here at 101 Mounts Bay Road in the board's boardroom in Building F at 5:30 p.m. It will be a live stream, so if you're in person, great. If you can't make 5:30, Sharon McCarthy, our Financial Management Services Director, and I will be there, and we'll be presenting the budget and then trying to answer any questions that come up. So if you're in person, you can ask questions in person. We will live stream it. It'll be on demand. So if you miss that, it will be there for you to watch at your leisure at any time. And if you'll send us questions ahead of time, whether you're there or not, we will try to answer those questions. You can call my office, 757-253-6603, and ask your question. Or you can email it to us at community.meetings, that's plural, community.meetings@jamescitycountyva.gov. I think I got that address correct.
I think you did. And you had said that there were a couple of opportunities.
Sure.
So the 9th is the first one.
The 9th is the first one. The second is a public hearing. So that's less interactive. It's public hearings with our Board of Supervisors to talk about the tax rate, to talk about the meals tax, separate public hearings, and talk about the budget. So those will be... I think the meals tax may go along with the budget, but there will be a public hearing that talks about meals tax and the budget, and there'll be a public hearing that definitely talks about just the tax increase, meaning the board is not necessarily increasing the tax rate. As a matter of fact, the proposed budget recommends they reduce it by 3 cents, but your effective tax burden would go up because our overall reassessment was around 10% for our personal or for our real property. So that is the public hearing on that. So we do have to do at least 2 public hearings, but the community will have an opportunity to participate and share their comments at that meeting on all of things within the budget: meals tax, the real estate tax rate, and taxes, and the budget in general. So would encourage people to do it. And it's not very two-way. It's all community to the board for the board to listen. Based on community input and community reaction and questions we're getting, and we've had a few at the April 9th meeting and the budget public hearing, we do have 2 other dates in April where we may have community meetings. And again, if the community wants to meet, we want to be there. And so we'll publish those at a later date if the response from community seems to say, hey, we really want to know more and talk to you more about what's going on in James City County. Or the board may direct those meetings.
Okay.
But again, we're trying to at least have some other dates in April that we could talk, with the idea that the board would then hold at their regular meeting May 12th, which will be in their boardroom at 5 p.m. And I didn't say that about the public hearings. Again, they will be April 14th in their boardroom at 5 p.m. here at 101 Mounts Bay Road. So the May 12th meeting would be where we would hope the board would adopt the budget. There's a public comment section there. There's no public hearing, but public comment ahead of their meeting. They certainly would still take input on the budget.
And again, that's May 12th that we're hoping.
May 12th for the adoption. Okay. Whatever I said, May 12th is for the adoption. And the board will talk about it at their business meeting April 28th. Again, that is really just the board talking with staff about the budget, not an opportunity for public comment or input there. But certainly the board appreciates the emails, appreciates citizens talking with them and trying to help them understand the board, the citizens' perspective, as well as the board trying to help our residents understand the perspective from the county and what those additional funds are needed for.
Okay. Well, I imagine you'd like to go ahead and jump right in.
I will at least start. It's a lot of numbers, and I talk all the time about the budget as a simple document, but it's a lot of simple put together, and it's really hard to sometimes comprehend how it all intertwines and goes together. And I've been asked multiple times, well, what's your budget? Well, our budget that we are proposing is a $413 million budget for FY27. That includes our capital outlay. Capital outlay items, if we have a $50 million item, it'll show up one year and then drop the next year. So that our budget can fluctuate substantially because of these capital improvement projects. When we talk about what is really year-to-year comparison and what is the best comparison year-to-year, year, it's really our general fund. And our budget's made up of about 5 funds, the general fund being our primary fund. It's where property taxes go. It's where a lot of our sales taxes go. It's where most of our revenue is. And that is a $281.5 million proposed budget for FY27, which is a 6.8% increase, or about a $17 million increase in our general fund expenditures. And again, that funds schools, public safety, police and fire. It's our parks and rec. It's our debt service. It's our capital projects. So it's all really all inclusive to where the county's funds are going to support community needs. As we go through this, it does recommend a 3% tax rate decrease. It's not a revenue neutral rate. The revenue neutral rate is 74.4 cents. So again, 80 cents does mean there's an effective tax increase, but the tax rate's recommended to reduce some to offset that. It makes the tax rate increase, the effective tax rate, about a 6% increase. And over 2 years, which we do a 2-year process on our reassessments, that's really 3% a year. So that is really what that recommendation is based on. It's also spread out to recommend the increase of a meals tax. Meals tax, the county has only had the authority until recently of 4%. We now have the authority to go to 6%. 2 things it does for us. One, it's diversifying our revenue. So it's moving a little bit of our reliance on the property tax, the real property tax, to a meals tax. So a different revenue stream for the county. We are still very reliant on our property taxes for homes and real estate, trying to diversify that some. We did it with cigarette taxes, where we got that authority some years ago, recommending that with meals taxes. And where we're going is really in keeping with the localities around us, from New Kent having a 6%, to York County making the same recommendation, go to 6%, to the city of Williamsburg being at 6.5%. They just recently went to that, to Newport News and Hampton being at 7.5%. So our authority does go up to 6%, and that is the recommendation from me to the board, is that they consider that. We don't have the authority for an emissions tax at this point. We've asked for that. That may be something we could consider at a later time, but in the proposed budget, we don't have that authority, so it's not there. So it's, again, trying to diversify some of those revenues so that our reliance on any one place of sales tax is not just our property tax. It is personal property, real property, sales tax, meals tax, lodging tax, and meals and hotel, motel kinds of things.
Okay. What would you say if residents are feeling that we are trying to drive mom and pop restaurants out of town?
That's absolutely not the case. We're not trying to drive anybody from our residents, because I hear that sometimes from our residents and what their reassessments and can they afford to live here with the cost of housing and everything else that's increasing. And I know I am very sensitive, and our board expresses that as well, of being very sensitive to those cost pressures on all of our residents and our business community. So we're certainly not trying to drive people away, restaurants or our residents. So the one thing with the meals tax, property tax, if you're paying property tax on your house, that is primarily you paying property tax on your house. That is almost entirely paid by us as residents here. And you have some variations where people rent a house, and maybe their renters are helping through rents they're paying, or maybe you're doing a short-term rental and recovering some of that property tax costs through that. But by and large, we pay the property tax if we live here in the county. Meals tax, we pay if we go out to eat. It's a little more discretionary. I mean, I think people would argue today maybe it's not so discretionary anymore, and we eat out a lot more as a society than we used to. But it is one of those things you can choose to do that. And then when we have visitors, and we have a volume of visitors to our community, they pay that tax as well. So I don't want to discount that it's an increase, because it is. It's certainly not meant to run our business community, our restaurants in particular, out or drive away visitation or stop our residents from eating out. It's just trying to diversify that revenue. So I do understand the concern. We are not ahead or above average than anybody around us. So we've looked to see that we're not doing some anomaly here. And I don't think it's driving people for a 2% differential from one locality to another. And in this case, we'd be catching up. We're not going to be ahead of those other localities around us. So the intent is not to hurt our small business, or any business for that matter. But I do know it has an impact, at least psychologically, if nothing else. And with all the other cost pressures, it is a concern.
Okay. Thank you. So what else?
We had a number of positions requested in the budget. And again, revenue wasn't there this year, so I don't have any recommended positions. We have some years ago decided that focusing on positions we had and people that were here and making sure they were compensated fairly would make a difference. And there was a period of time 2 or 3 years ago where we really struggled with filling our vacancies in many of our departments, from police to fire to planning to accounting to our general service workers. You name it, we almost had vacancies that had existed for a very long time. We did do an implementation of a significant pay and class study 2 years ago, that has made a tremendous difference. It hasn't solved all of our vacancy issue, but if it has solved 90+% of them. And again, I feel very good about where we are. So keeping our compensation competitive is important. So it does support in this year's proposed budget a 4% increase for our staff. That is one of those things that as I talk with other managers in the region, that is not out of range. Some are implementing a pay plan this year. They will do more than 4%. Many are doing 3 to 5%. A lot of localities have step plans, which we do not, which means their employees get an automatic increase whether the board takes any action or not. Our employees do not benefit from that. So the 4% is what they would get as a general wage increase, cost of living increase, whatever you want to call that, for our staff. And again, I think that keeps us competitive. It doesn't move us ahead. One item in there to help move us ahead is rather than waiting typically these 5 to 10 year periods and doing a pay study plan, we are trying to do something where we start evaluating a certain number of positions, 25 or 30% every year, so that we're making some modest increases versus getting to a 5 or 10 year period where we're so far behind. It's a huge number. And so that is included in this year's budget, which ought to be good for our employees and keeping people here. It ought to be good for the community because it's not as big a shock. And when they call, we should be closer to fully staffed if our wages are competitive. That is what we've experienced these last 2 years with the implementation of our pay plan. We have a number of items in our capital improvement program, and I don't want to go into the details here. It's just harder to get there.
Mm-hmm.
But we funded schools by contract. I want to mention lacrosse because there was a big outcry from our students, and I will tell you it was a lot of fun having the students in the audience. They were very polite, they were very succinct, and they certainly made their point. So the board heard you, to the students that are out there. But our school division, we worked on a contract all year, which talked about what we would fund in schools. And what we came up with was $4 million from the county and a little over $2 million from the city. So the schools had significant local additional funding, which they knew. They had indicated the desire to have about $1.2 million more for a number of things, some of which would help to implement the lacrosse program. What we believe, and again, I hope will fall out, is as the state budget gets approved, there will be more money for the school. So that additional $1.2 million I think is needed, but the county put in $4 million. But on top of that, last year we funded another $1 million of operating with some of the school's reserves, which meant we really had to put in $5 million this year. So we're really $1 million ahead of the contract. The other thing that was new from the schools this year is the funding of, not the request, but the funding of Cooley Field from the county. Mm-hmm. The school division had been asking for a number of years for the county and the city to replace the natural grass there with artificial turf due to the usage, the demands at Cooley Field, and the usage, and then when you have just regular grass, it can't be used year round because you have to leave time for the turf to grow. So we have not funded that until this year, but that was a new request in next year's CIP. And so that is in the county's proposed budget. I think our share of that almost $2 million project is about $1.6 million, and it will support lacrosse. So when folks saying you're not supportive of lacrosse, Cooley Field and lacrosse being turf, that's a big reason, not just lacrosse, because there are other sports and needs within the school division, but lacrosse is certainly the driver that got it across the finish line. And the school division made a real plea for that during our budget negotiations. So that is funded, or at least proposed in the proposed budget to receive funding.
Well, and I think something that is sometimes misconstrued, the county and the city, per the contract, give X amount of dollars to the school system.
Yes.
We do not say, this is what you have in your line item for crayons, and this is what you have in your line item for pencils.
True.
Can you remind folks of that a little bit, or am I understanding that correctly?
Renee, that is correct. I would tell you the school division, I think, goes to great lengths, and they will answer whatever questions we ask about where they intend for the money to go. Mm-hmm. And we do have meetings both on their capital improvement projects and their operations budget, and they would answer whatever questions the Board of Supervisors or the City Council might have of the school board and the superintendent. So I think we have a very good relationship in terms of that. At the end of the day, what we give the school division, what we improve, this $104 million from the county, the school division can use that for any educational purpose they deem appropriate. So they could shift money around. I haven't known them to not fund the things they sort of indicated were important, mm-hmm. but they certainly have that right to reorganize their priorities and move that funding once approved to where they believe they need it most. Because what you project and when you're putting together a budget last fall, where you might be and what finally gets approved this spring might be different in terms of priorities. And I think we have a good relationship with the superintendent and I where that would be communicated. They wouldn't do something that we are absolutely against, mm-hmm. but our Board of Supervisors really has no ability to stop it. So they could do something that we didn't like with the money, and to my knowledge, they never have, and I don't expect that to change, but they can reprioritize where that money goes within the school division. So you're right. Ultimately, the school board has that discretion with local dollars, what they get it from us and the city of Williamsburg, and I assume some discretion with their state funding as well.
Okay. Anything else that you want to cover today?
A big part of the budget of the year and where we've heard a lot of commenting is reassessments. And I wish the process were more precise and a little more consistent. And so, when I look back, just trying to see where reassessments have been and where they are today, and we're going to talk a little bit about reassessments, really going back to 2015, where values increased less than 1% for 3 years, three cycles in a row. So over 2015 to say 2019, home values just didn't increase very much. Whether that was the market, whether that was our staff and their processes, I'm not sure, but they just didn't. And so then in 2021, we went up almost 2%. And then the next cycle, we went up almost 8%. And then the next cycle, which was 2025, we went up 18%. I still believe in large cases, our values are behind the market. In 2027, we went up 10%. So again, we've had significant increases. When you look over that past 12-year period, the value, what people paid in tax on a $300,000 home in 2015 was about $2,300 a year. What they'd pay on that same home today, if they were the average increase, would be right around $3,500. So about a $1,200 increase, which is about a 4% per year over that 12-year period. I'm not saying that's good or bad, but it's not crazy related to CPI over those years. Maybe a little ahead of it, but not way ahead. And the challenge with the reassessment process is very few of us are in the average. I've talked with several homeowners or property owners this time who had no increase the last two cycles, who had a huge increase this time. So when the average was 20% 2 years ago and almost 10% 4 years ago, so 30% increase in those 4 years, these people with huge increases this time had zero increase. And that is part of our process of maybe we didn't catch those homes or for whatever reason there weren't sales data to support an increase, but the value of their property, when I've said, well, that significant increase you've had this year, is that where your home's value is? Because you certainly can appeal it if you think our values are mistaken. State code says we're supposed to get them to market value. It's not an appraisal, but it should be close to what you believe it would sell for. In most cases, when I talk to property owners, although their increase might be significant, what they have by and large told me is that it is really close to what they think they could sell it for. Generally, it's still under, and that's where we I think should be, is just below that. But if our residents feel their values are not right, I hope they've taken advantage of the appeal process. And we've had a few this year. It's less than we had 2 years ago. But that reassessment process, when we say the average is 10%, and that's what we're saying this year for the 2027 values, some people could have 15, 20, 30% increases, and some people could have no increase or maybe a negative increase in value because the average is at around 10%. Some are higher, some are lower. And I do think the people that are most vocal are ones whose increase is significant this year. And hopefully it hadn't been significant in past years, but certainly there's always that group, whether you do reassessments every year or every other year like James City County does. So I think for me and our community, ask questions. We gave you opportunities for public input. Again, April 9th will be the first one for us to at least give you a high-level discussion of the budget. We are happy to talk more about it and answer questions. Again, that's April 9th, right? 5:30 p.m. in the boardroom at 101 Mounts Bay Road, Building F, 5:30 p.m. We will live stream it. You can view it on demand. If you submit your questions ahead of time, we will answer those questions during the meeting. If you're present at the meeting and ask questions, we will answer the questions to the best of our ability. Then, certainly public hearing April 14th at 5 p.m., the boardroom, 101 Mounts Bay Road, with the Board of Supervisors. One-way communication there, but still your opportunity as residents to talk about tax rate, meals tax, and our overall budget, and certainly encourage people to come there. If you have questions about the budget, I would encourage you to give me a call. My direct line, 757-253-6603. Again, be happy to answer questions and make sure you have that information one way or the other so you understand sort of why and what the needs are within our community.
All right. Well, Scott, thank you so much for coming by and letting us know what's going on.
Renee, you bet. Talk to you soon.
Take care. Bye-bye. Well, that wraps up this episode of This Week in James City County. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, please be sure to subscribe. That way you will never miss an episode. You can also go to our website. We're at jamescitycountyva.gov/podcast. And while there, you'll be able to find all of our episodes, as well as a form. You can give us show ideas, comments, critiques. We would love to hear from you. So once again, thank you so much, and we will talk with you next week.